Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kathleen Murphy, and on behalf of the Women in STEM Cooperative, welcome to our original online series about expanding the participation of women in undergraduate STEM education. Today's session is dedicated to perspectives on institutional change. So about us, the Women in STEM Cooperative consists of a group of volunteers dedicated to advancing women in STEM in our respective communities at the University of Buffalo and Cornell University. This series is our attempt to address some of the systemic challenges and opportunities with improving student STEM success. So before we invite today's distinguished panel to get started, I did want to take this moment to welcome all of you. Believe it or not, over 100 of your colleagues representing 52 institutions of higher education and 8 other organizations from 3 countries, 1 territory, and 25 states express interest in the entire series. If you are joining us today, so please say hello in the chat room. That's that little text box next to the 18 count. And tell us where you're from while I introduce Patrice Prusco, my series co-chair from Cornell University. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen, and welcome everyone. We're thrilled that you could join us here today. And in addition to having the opportunity to hear from our invited speakers, one of the reasons that we chose the Shindig platform was because we really want to develop a community where you have an opportunity to ask questions, share what's going on your own campus, and really learn from one another, maybe connect on a possible future study or project. And Chris Downs, in a few minutes, will show you a video that goes through the options for interacting on the Shindig platform, which, as Kathleen mentioned, you can put something in the text chat box if you just want to talk to the people in your room. You also have the opportunity to type in a question, or what we really hope you do is raise your hand to come up on stage and ask a question and interact one-on-one with our speakers. And I next would like to introduce the speakers that we have today. And today we welcome Dr. Nancy Shapiro, who is Associate Vice Chancellor for Education and Outreach at the University System of Maryland. Dr. Renata Tall, who is the Associate Vice Provost for Strategic Initiatives at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Founding Director, Co-PI for the 12-institution University System of Maryland's Promise, and Co-Director, Co-PI for the USM's Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. And they will be our first speakers today. Following them will be Dr. Amy Goddard, who is the Director of the Learning Strategies Center and Executive Director of Academic Student Success Programs at Cornell University. And we will wrap things up with Dr. Letitia Thomas, Director of STEM Diversity Programs in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences at the University at Buffalo. And again, we really want to encourage you to take the opportunity to come up on stage and talk with the speakers and share some of your experiences and ask them some questions. And with that, Chris, I'll turn it over to you so you can share the video on how to navigate Shindig.
Welcome to Shindig, the video chat event provider. Click on any participant's image to engage in a private video chat. Double-click on another participant to add them to your existing conversation. Click the arrow to exit. You can also send an instant message, either to an individual or to your entire room. Want to interact with the host? Use the buttons on the lower right. Click Raise Hand to signal to the event administrator that you want to be brought on stage. Otherwise, submit a question to the host via text. If the system has not automatically detected your webcam and microphone, roll over your image and click Settings. Click your image to enable your working webcam. Choose a working microphone by selecting the option with volume indicators that flash green in response to your voice. We hope this was helpful. Enjoy the event.
Okay, so Chris, now you'll bring up Nancy and Renata, and Kathleen will begin the conversation with them.
Hi, Nancy and Renata. How are you?
Hi, Kathleen.
Hello.
How are you? We're glad to be here.
We're super excited to have you kick off today's session and introduce today's topic and share some of your own successes from the University System of Maryland. So without further ado, take it away.
Okay, well, I'm going to begin, and You're going to see me moving my glasses back and forth, so I apologize, everybody, but I just can't get used to these reading glasses. So, so here we go. So I'm really glad to be here to talk today about the idea of change in higher education. That was the topic that I was asked to talk about, and it strikes me that you have probably all heard the sort of cliche joke about how many faculty members, how many university professors does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is change. It's not a real change is a hard topic to talk about in higher education for a lot of reasons. One of those reasons is that we are good at what we do, and we rely on each other's expertise to endorse and screen our work. So we're not sure that change is actually going to make a big difference in improving what we do. But I want to talk specifically about some of the work we did for NSF several years ago, when they asked us to latch on to the math science partnership work that they had been funded to disseminate across the country, and follow up with some of the projects that had been funded to ensure that we actually were getting the biggest bang for the buck out of these projects. This is sort of a STEM-oriented conversation, and really, I think it would be good for you to keep in mind that the things that we're interested in is actually increasing the diversity of our STEM faculty and professional engagement, and also the pipeline into STEM professions and STEM fields. And that's actually what the National Science Foundation Math Science Partnerships were all about back in the early 2000s. They received about $160 million from the Department of Education to launch partnership projects. And one of the things, we were the recipients of two of those big projects, the University System of Maryland with many of our system partners and community college partners and public school partners. And one of the things that we learned as we were going through some of that partnership work is that the kind of work that the National Science Foundation thought would be most productive around getting to the goal of a great sort of broader STEM engagement was not necessarily going to be rewarded on at the universities that they were funding. So just to remind some of you, if you had some of those math science partnerships, there were 5 key challenges. The 5 key features of the math science partnerships included challenging STEM courses and curricula, enhancing teacher quality, quantity, and diversity, partnerships among STEM teachers and faculty at all levels, P through 20, and evidence-based course and curriculum design, and finally, institutional change and sustainability. What turned out to be a challenge is that a lot of these 5 key features are not traditionally valued as faculty work. When people revise their courses, they were maybe revising the content of the courses, but not necessarily the pedagogy of the courses, because the pedagogy wasn't considered a STEM priority. Similarly, when faculty were being supported through these grants to work with the K-12 schools and this K-12's teachers, that was considered outreach or service. It wasn't part of the traditional work that is defined as faculty work. So the project we were funded to do was to sort of look, this was a supplement to our NSF MSP grant, was to look broadly across the, at the time, 73 projects that had been funded by the National Science Foundation to figure out what could we find that was in common that actually accelerated change or allowed faculty to be supported in this work. We spent about 3 years interviewing, doing focus groups with project leaders, going to campuses, going to institutions that were had been funded with MSP grants, and asking these questions. You know, is this going to be part of your sustainable work? Is this, how is the campus responding to this work? and trying to figure out what worked in those campuses. And what we would say to our NSF project officer was, we're trying to catch institutions doing something good. We didn't want to critique everyone. We just wanted to find what was working, what was good. And we found a couple of interesting things, and I'll sort of summarize them. And Renetta and I will go back and forth a little bit in our conversation, I think. So one of the things we found is that we did get some faculty leaders out of this work. And the question was, at what point did that faculty leadership, when did it move from being marginal to being mission central? And that's something that you might want to ask yourselves about the kind of work that Kathleen and her colleagues are stimulating with these conversations. When does this kind of a conversation move from being marginal to being mission central? So that's the first question I would sort of ask you to think about. The second question I would ask you to think about is, to the extent that faculty and administrators are working on two different planes, even though many of the academic administrators come from the faculty, once you become an administrator, your accountability changes. And accountability is sort of the coin of the realm for institutions to prove their value, especially public institutions, to prove their value and their value added. But in the faculty realm, what is the definition of accountability in a shared governance environment? So not a conflict exactly, but the balance between shared governance and on the faculty end and administrative accountability has to be negotiated if, in fact, you want to bring the change into the center of the campus. I have a bunch of other little observations here. Hold on a second. So one of the big challenges was understanding that the efforts that faculty were making to change their courses, to make them more pedagogically not just efficient but effective, they didn't have the tools. They didn't know what student learning theory was or how student development influenced what students understood about abstract concepts. Interestingly enough, the K-12 teachers that they were working with had a lot more expertise on student learning than the faculty members who were their partners. And so engaging the K-12 teachers as part of the learning community on a campus to improve STEM education for all students became a really interesting challenge, where the K-12 teachers, how do you get their voice heard, and who uses that? I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to turn it over to Renetta. But there's a lot more, and maybe at some point the people in the audience would like to ask some questions about some of the work that we did. But let me give Renetta a chance to talk. Okay.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly good to be here, and I thank you again for the invitation. So I'm going to take this from the perspective of looking at some of the programs that we've been able to do within the University System of Maryland, and particularly at some of our universities. I'm going to speak from the perspective of being a practitioner and particularly a PI of certain programs for which we've received funding from the National Science Foundation. Those three programs that I'll discuss will be the LSAMP program, Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, the LSAMP Bridge to the Doctorate program, and then the Promise AGET program that Patrice mentioned when we started, which stands for Alliances for Graduate Education in the Professoriate. And keeping in mind that all of these programs do include very strong pieces that cater to making sure that we're including women and different issues that may pertain to women. So the LSAMP program is a program for undergraduate students in STEM programs. And that program it started with UMBC as the lead institution. It also includes the University of Maryland College Park and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. That program has been in existence for more than 20 years. And several of you in the audience may have heard of UMBC's Meyerhoff program, which has been really a very strong program within the state of Maryland for bringing underrepresented students into the STEM fields, retaining them, and then training them to go on to science careers. Many of them are getting PhDs, some of them MD PhDs, and other kinds of things, but they are really influencing STEM workforce diversity. Within LSAMP, there are two particular programs that we developed for retention of underrepresented students in STEM, and to also make sure that women were being retained in STEM. At the undergraduate level, that's the Bridging Conference, where we are welcoming new students into the STEM enterprise, talking to them about their STEM identity. And then the Math Institute, where we're making sure that they have enhanced math skills. The LSAMP Bridge to the Doctorate program is more of a bridge. That program is a specific fellowship program. UMBC and the University of Maryland College Park both have that program, where they are given a stipend. The students are given a stipend, a fellowship, for more than 2 years. And it provides them with professional development as well as funding to sort of bridge that time frame between their undergraduate degree and a PhD program, many times getting either a master's along the way or finishing the first 2 years of the PhD. And then finally, the Promise AGET program focuses on graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. And there are two signature programs that we have here. One of them is the Dissertation House, where we provide a mechanism for students to work on their dissertations. We have a dissertation coach. We talk about health and wellness. And then the SSI, or the Summer Success Institute. And Cornell has now a version of this that they've adapted from our Promise AGEP. They call theirs the S3 program. And so we're very pleased to sort of have been at the foundation of that. That program really provides some background, motivation, encouragement, professional development training for graduate students. And we're very pleased with that. Our program also works sort of outside of the walls of the academic institution by supporting students at conferences with in-conference mentoring at conferences like the LACSE Conference, the Latin and Caribbean Consortium of Engineering Institutions, the Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers, or SHIP, SOCNIS, the Society for the Advancement of Chicano and Native American Scientists. I know one of your other guests, Letitia, and I had a chance to meet in Atlanta about a week ago at the SREB conference, which is the Southern Regional Education Board conference, the Institute for Teaching and Mentoring, which focuses on graduate students and transitioning graduate students to become faculty members. And recently, the ABRCAMS conference, the annual biomedical research conference for minority students. And I wanted to make sure that I say that there are about 3 social science constructs that we use to really make sure that students are retained in our programs and that they're able to transition to careers. The first one is based on McMillan and Chavis's psychological sense of community. And that has 4 different elements of membership, making sure that people feel like they are a member of the enterprise. Influence, do they have some sort of influence on the program itself? Are their opinions valued, and do we take information from them as stakeholders to help to inform our processes? Reinforcement, integration of needs, really paying attention to those personal needs that students may have, as well as the academic needs. And this is where career life balance kinds of things, or career life integration, comes in, and shared emotional connection. So one of the things that we've noticed, for example, is that we had to emotionally connect in some cases to some of our graduate students who had lost children along the way as students. And so we had to take some time out. People were in this transition point where they were no longer sort of under their parents' realm, but they were more independent, and there were certain things they were dealing with for the first time, death being one of them. STEM identity is something that I mentioned a few minutes ago, and making sure that our students are very strongly connected to STEM identity, recognizing themselves in the role of being in STEM, and then having people who are in certain hierarchies also recognize them in that role. And then finally, cultural capital or cultural wealth. where we're really valuing all these different parts of the whole person, how they navigate their spaces, how they resist against things that may be against them from an equity point of view, and how we just honor all parts of them.
So actually, I have a question, Renetta.
Yes.
Listening to that and thinking about the change dynamic at universities, it strikes me that those parameters that you described as relevant to the transition, the students who are in these support programs, are very relevant to actually faculty themselves.
Yes.
And to what extent, and that social science framework of querying relationships and the identity and even empathy issues seem to me to be almost as important for STEM faculty to address themselves as to their graduate students. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you're working on, or how do you build that into the work?
Yes. So several of you may be also aware of various advanced programs that are sponsored by the National Science Foundation. I know that many of the schools who are represented here also have an advanced program. UMBC has had an advanced program where they're looking at how to advance women across the ranks of faculty and administration, and these are some of the issues that have been built in, but I would say not so much to an explicit amount in the way that we are doing it for students. But we do capture that, and some of those things are captured in seminars and workshops. And as an example, one of the things that the advanced program at UMBC does is they will invite in an eminent scholar to have a technical talk during the day, but during the day, their schedule is also segmented so that there are personal conversations that are held, for example, with the women faculty, personal conversations that are held with maybe some individuals, and they cover a lot of these different kinds of details. We did at one time also have a combination luncheon between our women STEM faculty and our graduate student STEM faculty, particularly to talk about career life balance or career life integration kinds of issues. And so this has been an ongoing conversation that we've tried to have over the last year.
That's awesome. We have a couple of questions from the audience. Are you guys ready?
We're ready. Yeah.
Chris, you can bring me down and bring them up.
How do you see the role of organizations like the Royal Society of Chemistry changing practice of teaching STEM? Great question. Who asked that question? Because that was one of the points I wanted to make, that in fact, one of the things that happens at universities in order to reward faculty, you can't just come in and change the faculty reward structure from the top down. I mean, anybody who's a member of a faculty right now, a department, knows that tenure and promotion are not the purview of the administration. They are the purview of the faculty. So how do you decide, how do you peer review work that actually engages faculty with K-12 teachers, for example? Where's the beef? Yes, you went out and you volunteered and you did a professional development workshop for a bunch of chemistry teachers. And then you come back to your campus and say, I was really a good citizen. I did these professional development workshops. So what? How do you put it into your portfolio or your vita? One of the things that the professional associations, chemistry, math, physics, all of them can do is actually provide a vehicle for the peer-reviewed content to be published, whether it is in a section of their most highly respected journals, sort of a section on teaching and learning chemistry, or a section on, outreach to the public schools and what it is, the differences between teaching K-12 students and university students, whatever. If the faculty member who's doing that can get some publication credit for it in peer-reviewed journals, that would make a big difference. The other thing that societies can do, and this came from our cachet work, this actually came from our Change and Sustainability in Higher Education grant that we got from the NSF. We sort of tried to lobby the professional associations to create strands of conference strands in their most desired conference meetings, annual meetings, for this kind of work. Because if you can present it to your peers, then it becomes recognized as a legitimate role for faculty to play. So in those ways, I think the associations actually have a big role to play in validating the work that we're saying is important.
Thank you. Thank you. In the interest of time, we need to move on to our next speaker. However, I want to invite all of the guests to ask questions because Nancy and Renetta are going to stick around. So you can either connect with them directly or ask a question in the chat box, and we will revisit it after all of our speakers have had an opportunity to present. So thank you from all of us, and stick around because we're going to have more questions for you.
Or if you're somewhere where you can't talk out loud, you can certainly click on the little bubble with the question mark and type in your question. And then, as we did previously, we'll read that for you. But please come on up and interact with us. And now I would like to thank Amy for coming today. And we're going to start out just by hearing a little bit about Amy's new role. She was recently named executive director of a new organization. I have to read this because it's so long. Of a new organization that combines the Office of Academic Diversity Initiatives, the Intergroup Dialogue Project, and the Learning Strategy Center, so they can work more closely together in a redefined structure to support inclusive academic student success. So Amy, can you tell us a little bit about what academic student success programs are?
That's actually a really good question, and I'm excited to be part of this new group. And we're really looking at the missions of the different groups that we have that are on the slide here that you can see them. And we're looking at how these missions overlap, and we're looking at the different types of support that we offer for the students to really propel them towards what they see as their successful endpoints here at Cornell. And we're looking at that, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through. We're looking at that from before they sometimes even start here at Cornell, through their careers here, and preparing them for programs that come afterwards, such as graduate school. And I was really happy to hear about the ABRCAMS conference. I was actually talking with some of our students who went there and were presenting. I think it was in Phoenix this year. So it's nice to hear about that as well. So in terms of what these units are really trying to do and how we're trying to work together to kind of strengthen the relationships that we have, we're really looking at, and the other speakers were talking about identities, and we're looking at strengthening the diverse identities of our students, this idea of communication across difference. And I think belonging was also mentioned by the previous speakers. So promoting the sense of belonging, particularly in the academic context. So the groups that I work with are in the Office of the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education. And so we're really looking at that academic context for our students. And Cornell is a pretty rigorous institution, and so we are also working with our students to help them become more independent learners and master the rigors that are here at Cornell. And thinking about these support networks and belonging, again, we're thinking about how do we help our students develop these networks to support both their personal growth and also their professional and academic goals that they see. So that's kind of an overview of some of the things that we're looking at working on as a new group here on campus.
So can you tell us a little more about some of the specific initiatives that you're either currently working on or hoping to develop? And also, what are some of the challenges that students face to, being able to thrive at Cornell and at other universities that you see?
Yep. That's a really great question, this idea of thriving. And I'd be curious to hear from the audience if they have any things in particular that they see for helping their students thrive at their institutions. And I like to look at it in a way, it's been a long time since I've actually transitioned from high school to college. That's a long time ago for me, and maybe for some of you as well. But there are other transitions that I've gone through in my career, and I'd like to think about, well, what is it that I've had to go through, and what are the things that have been difficult for me as I've transitioned from one context or position into another context or position. And these are things that I bring to bear when I have conversations with students as well. And so in terms of what is it that is preventing some of our students from thriving, or the challenges that they're facing, one is that when to actually seek out support. So for some of our students, and Cornell is wonderful, we have a variety of resources that are available for students to take advantage of. But part of the challenge is, when do we seek out that support? When do students actually take advantage of it? And are they even aware that that support exists? And so these are conversations that we're having with others across campus to kind of get the message out there about the support. And also to say that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, as this is some of our students have this perception that, oh my goodness, if I ask for help, it's identifying that I don't know what I'm doing or that maybe I have some challenges. And for some people, they find that to be particularly threatening. Some of our students have no problem with that, and they just take advantage of everything that's out there for them. And so when we're thinking about STEM, and I know that this conversation is pretty much STEM focused, when we're thinking about STEM, getting that help early and often is going to be really critical for the students, because as we know, STEM is pretty sequential. You can't take the third course in a sequence until you finish the first two. And if you're struggling in that first course, then you're going to be set back when you're taking those later courses. So the other thing we do work with our students on is to help them thrive is really just adapting to the rigors of Cornell. And I think this is true, again, whenever you're thinking about a transition from one place to another, what are those challenges that you're going to face? What made you successful in high school may not translate in the same way to when you're here in an institution of higher education. And so we do a number of things to really help our students be successful, to develop those academic skills for success. And then, of course, the other one of the big skills that I think students need that we work with students on is this idea of managing time effectively. So this was brought up by the other speakers. When students are coming to Cornell, they're finding both their academic identity and also trying to create that sense of belonging and community within the context of this new environment. They're making new friends, they're finding new people, new groups, all of that. And that takes up mental capital as well. It takes up time, it takes up energy. And they're doing that in conjunction with, really in their first year, how do I become successful in the academic area as well? So sometimes they take on a little bit too much, and those are also things that we talk with the students about, in addition to, how much time are you spending on your apps and all of those things. What is it that you need to do in order to balance your time more effectively? So those are some of the things that we see as the challenges to barriers, challenges or barriers that prevent students from thriving. And if we're thinking about specific initiatives, this is to the other question that you have. I think I can talk about a few, but did you want to hear about some of the underserved students initiatives that we have?
Could you share? I know that, it's great to hear everyone talking about sense of belonging, because I think a lot of the research shows that that is one of the reasons why a lot of, underserved students don't persist in STEM. And I know at Cornell and possibly, at similar universities, we don't so much have a problem retaining students at the university as retaining them in their majors. And those first gateway courses continue to be a barrier. And so I would be interested in hearing about initiatives that Cornell has to support underserved students, as they come to Cornell or before they even come to Cornell.
Yeah, so I'll talk about two things. And the first is actually going to be our pre-freshman summer program, which I'm going to try the raise the hand thing here. So everyone bear with me. So does anyone at their institution, do you have a summer bridge program? So something that helps students transition from their high school to their college experience. So something in the summer before students actually start at orientation. Let's see if I can do the raise. So click on the little hand to raise your hand if you have a summer bridge program.
Yeah, but in the background, Chris will be tallying how many people raise their hand.
Okay, so there's a few institutions that do. All right, so let me figure out how to close this window. All right, we'll give everyone a second to figure out how to raise their hands. And so while you're raising your hands, I'll talk a little bit about the program that we have here. And this is offered through our Learning Strategy Center. So our pre-freshman summer program is a 6-week summer bridge program that helps prepare students for their time matriculating at Cornell. We have about 200 students that we bring to campus, again, for these 6 weeks before the school year starts. And The goal of the program really is twofold, and we're looking at supporting the students academically, so developing and strengthening their skills in specific areas. And many of these are STEM areas. Chemistry and math are two that are big ones that we're helping to prepare our students for. And then the other area that we're really focusing in on is this idea of belonging and this new context that students are joining this community here at Cornell. And so we introduce students to the support services that are available, because you have to know that they're there in order to take advantage of them, and then to provide a comprehensive orientation to the Cornell campus in general. So we have this 6-week program that we've developed, and it's kind of tailored. We have 7 different undergraduate colleges here at Cornell, and we tailor the experience for the students in the colleges. So we have programmatic components, and then there are college academic components that the students need to do in the summer program. And I can talk for a long time about this program. It's a really wonderful program, but we just created a video that kind of highlights some of the great things that the students are getting out of this. And so if we could show that video here, I think it's going to give you a better sense of what the students are getting out of it than I think I can convey.
You're exposed to 200 new people that you've never seen before. And while 200 may seem like a big number, it really is very small in comparison to the size of this institution, and you really create a sense of community. You're all living together in the same house, you're all studying together, creating those little groups.
I think PSP really did a great job of helping us bond as a community and just like get to know each other.
Coming to a new school and not really knowing anyone can be really difficult, and PSP was a place where I was able to meet a lot of new people, and a lot of my friends now are my friends from PSP.
My friends that I made at PSP are introducing me to people that they've met.
It made me feel like I belonged. I feel like had I not come to PSP, I would have felt very lost, because it's small things like finding where your dorm is and knowing where your school buildings are that's kind of made you feel like, okay, this is my second home. So that kind of freedom to come before and enjoy an Ithaca summer instead of the Ithaca winter was pretty great.
PSP, it definitely gave me an opportunity to immerse myself in every aspect of Cornell possible, because there's only so much that you can read online in a book or even have someone told to you. But when you're here and it is presented to you, and you're actually able to go out and do those things, then that in itself is a totally different experience.
Exposing us to what Cornell has to offer and really giving us like a synthesized version of different activities that are on campus, different ways that we can explore and take advantage of Cornell.
I believe that the most effective part of the PSP program is having these orientation events and check-in events as well.
It also just helped understanding that like professors are here to help. I think that was one of the biggest things that PSP did for us. Like, you can go up to a professor, you can go up to a staff member, they're not going to bite you. Like, they're here for you.
I think the most effective part of PSP was just allowing me to have a sense of community.
It teaches you a lot about yourself as well as the university. I learned a lot of things that I hadn't known about myself before, like what kind of student I was or how I would do so far from home.
Experiencing new things with people and trying to figure out like, where do I want to go with this?
Knowing what to do to like be successful here, like academically speaking, before I arrived on campus is just so helpful, and I'm so grateful for that.
There were always people around who were there for you and could help you with your schoolwork or just hang out and talk, pretty much anything.
The relationships that I built with the students, but also with the staff and the resources.
Knowing that I can handle like the workload of Cornell and just like being eased into it.
I think it's that whole finding your footing. I think people take for granted that yes, you're coming to Cornell, but you don't. This is a whole new environment. Like, you're not going to be who you were before in high school. You're not going to see how you were. And I think I learned so much about who I really am and how I perform in school and how I am socially.
When you come here, you find the best definition of yourself, and you find the best definition of other people. So, and when you find those definitions, you know, you bring them all together and you have a dictionary of kids that that you'll grow with and educate yourselves with throughout the course of your 4 years here.
Great video, and I just wanted to give a shout out to our media team for Dina and Serge. Thank you for not only putting that together and making sure it was ready for today's session. Can you talk a little bit? That was, and then we have a text question. Hearing all the wonderful things and impact that it seems to be having on the students. I'm not sure. I can't remember how many years the program has been going on, but presumably you've made some iterations and learned some things. Can you share with the audience a little bit about challenges you've faced, or different things that you've learned and changes that you've made to the program?
So I think one of the things that we're continually thinking about are what are the needs of the colleges. So again, Cornell has a variety of different undergraduate colleges that are here, and we're looking at what is it that those colleges need to help prepare their students. Because when we're looking at STEM disciplines, for example, we have a lot of students who are coming in for pre-med. And so we're constantly thinking about what is it that we need to do in order to have them get that background that they need, or that the work that they need in the academic courses. And so we have made some changes in terms of, and also bringing active learning into some of these courses. That's been a big push that we've been doing. So flipping the classroom and thinking about the idea of how do we really, again, think about preparing our students for the academic rigors that they have here at Cornell. And really, the other thing that we are very conscious of is we're bringing the students in this small group, and then they are transitioning in when the other students get here. So they're a small group. This is about 200 students of the 3,000 students that Cornell is bringing in. And so one of the other things we're thinking about is how do we have that transition happen as well. So those are some upcoming things. But we are always evaluating what's happening in the program. And that's one of our big things now, is how do we assess that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we have a text question, which I think Chris will put up now. So, we have two text questions. So here's the first one. I work with a few EDU orgs that I work with use the following tools: running peer-reviewed STEM journal, drive STEM campaign, and even run STEM comic books. Have you heard of any of those, Amy?
Peer-reviewed journal. Drive STEM campaigns, even run STEM comic books. Are these specific, is there a specific comic book? Oh, you're developing the comic book. That's really cool. I haven't seen the I know the PhD comics. Does that count? The Piled Higher and Deeper comics? But I do know that there's many different STEM journals. Who pays? Okay, so the question is, who pays for the PSP students? So actually, this is done through financial aid. Mm-hmm. So there's financial aid for the students who are coming. So the question was, who pays for it? Mm-hmm.
And I would just like to remind everyone again that I encourage you to raise your hand and come up on stage. We would love to hear. I think 4 people said they had programs on their campuses. If any of you want to come up and share with us the challenges and successes that you've had running with your program, we would love to hear from you. Hear from you as well.
Mm-hmm.
And how are the students selected for the program?
So this is done through the college admissions offices. So each of the colleges will look at the students that they're bringing in that year, and then they'll decide if they are going to be invited to the pre-freshman summer program. So it's done through the colleges, and they're looking at really what are the students coming in with, what is it that we can do to help them be more successful here at Cornell and to get the most out of their experience. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when, we were talking a little bit about sense of belonging and, what things that we can do to help students be successful. And, some of the discussions and research I've been looking at talks a lot about not just the inside the classroom experiences, but the outside. And I think sometimes, like Cornell and other universities, we forget about the number of students that might be working 20 or 30 hours a week or can't afford their textbooks, and different aspects of their lives that impact their ability to be successful. Are those things that your programs also help students navigate, or that you're kind of getting a sense of how we can best provide support for some of those aspects?
So we're always looking at inventorying the various support opportunities that are available for students here at Cornell. Some are available through some of the academic student success programs offices. Others are available at other places on campus. And so when we're working with the students who come to visit our offices, these are some of the things that we're presenting them with. But you're right, this is a challenge. And another challenge, in addition to when we're thinking about being able to afford different supplies or computers or things like that, the other thing that I want to draw your attention to is, and I may have mentioned this, is the terminology that we use every day in higher education that doesn't necessarily make sense to anyone who isn't immersed every day in higher education. Cornell has specific terms. I'm sure every other institution has words that they use that are specific to the institution that even if I heard, I wouldn't know. So when we're thinking about that sense of belonging, are we really explaining to some of our students what is a prelim? Like no one else has a prelim. And if I say the word prelim, what does that mean? So we use it every day. And our students don't know what that is. And this gets into how we're really helping the students both get what they need in order to be successful. And those are thinking about the monies and opportunities that are there, but also thinking about how do we help them understand that, you're not the only one that doesn't know what this is. And here's some resources that can help you with that.
Oh, and Nancy has a question for you.
So I have a question. So my question is, how is the summer program staffed? Is it, do you have regular faculty working with students, or graduate students or instructors? What's the role modeling going on, that's going on?
That's a great question. And so the way it's staffed, we have our School of Continuing Ed summer sessions. So we have a school here at Cornell that's offering all of the courses over the summer, and the pre-freshman summer program is affiliated with that. And what we do is we have faculty who are teaching in these courses. We also have undergraduates, many of whom have gone through the pre-freshman summer program, who are acting as undergraduate TAs. We call them course assistants, who are working with the students who are in these courses and in the program itself.
Thanks. That's a great model. It's really, it's wonderful to get, I've done work with peer mentors in regular undergraduate STEM courses. Students who have just gotten a little ahead, but it really gives them a sense of responsibility, but it also is such a great connector for those students.
It's a great connector. It's great networking. That's certainly something the students brought up in the video. The other thing is it's a great experience for the peer mentors who are in that place. And we do work with them on the skills that they're developing in that environment. So it's not just about helping other students. It's about them thinking about the tangible skills that they're developing.
Yeah. I was actually mentioning to Nancy that when I was a graduate student at Northwestern, I was one of those sort of mentors for a similar type of program. And it really helps also for training for faculty. So a lot of the skills that I learned working with the students in those summer programs, I was able to take with me when I became a member of the faculty later on. So it's just excellent all the way around at every single level.
And like I said, it is a very intentional part, working both with the faculty who are teaching the students in these courses, and then also the course assistants or the peer tutors who are there.
Well, thanks for coming up on stage to ask a question. And thank you, Amy, for joining us today. We're going to bring Letitia up now. And if you have time, Amy, to stick around in case people have questions at the end and to hear what Letitia is going to share with us. So while we wait for Letitia to get her sound taken care of, we had a few questions that we wanted to pose to you as an audience that we were hoping that you might come up on stage and share your experiences with. So one of them is, what are some examples of innovative, inclusive teaching practices in use at your institutions? And so we would love if somebody in our audience wanted to raise their hand and come up on stage and share a little bit about what you're doing at your university. Again, because one of our goals for these sessions really are for us to form a community and learn about what other people are doing and what successes other people have had. as well as what you've learned. What lessons have you learned? And I'll just share a few of the other questions. What are some of the barriers to systemic change in faculty practices at your institutions? And that was something that Nancy touched on a bit, and it would be really great to hear. I know she talked a little bit about, how we value what faculty do and what type of faculty work is valued. And if anyone has been able to shift the culture around teaching and learning at the university or change aspects of the tenure process, we would love to hear that. Oh, and we have somebody up on stage. Or we don't. Oh, no webcam. They don't have a webcam. Okay. So if you do want to come up on stage, we do need to ask you to put your webcam on. And another thing that we wanted to remind people, or remove yourself from privacy mode. So if you're in privacy mode, we won't be able to see you. And another thing we did want to remind people as you're mingling down below is that if you do click on the image of somebody else, you can have a conversation. So if there's somebody there that you've always wanted to meet, or I know sometimes I'm like, I've heard of that person on Twitter, but I've never talked to them, you can actually click on their picture and have a conversation. So I know at Cornell, our guest speaker last week, Dr. Julia Tom-Levy, talked a bit about the reorganization of our centers around the Center for Teaching Innovation, and we did. Oh, and let's see if Letitia's ready.
Hello.
Hi. Oh, perfect. Okay, we can hear you now. Yep, thank you. All right. So I will finish my thought later, and let's hear from Letitia.
Hello, thank you. And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. You practice and then it all goes horribly wrong. My name is Letitia Thomas. I am Director for STEM Diversity Programs here in the School of Engineering at the University at Buffalo. And my program really grew out of a desire from our Dean of Engineering, Dean Liesl Folks, who was really interested in making sure that the School of Engineering at UB was a more diverse community, that we embraced people from all backgrounds and cultures, really in order to improve our community here, and because we know that the future of engineering is in diverse communities, in diverse teams, in underrepresented students who may not have been brought on to the fore, that really there are so many students that have been left out, who have a lot of potential, who really want to study engineering. There is a lot of need and a lot of want. Usually in our past two freshman classes, 40% of the students have expressed a desire to study engineering. And so we know that the demand is out there, and what we're really working on is making sure that students feel welcome to the School of Engineering, the students are prepared to study engineering, and that once they get into the school and leave the school, that they are ready to work in diverse teams and to make the best of the education that they've received at UB. And so the Office of STEM Diversity has a lot of different charges, I would say. Something that I'm working on this week is search committee training. One of the things that we know is that diverse students really also want to see diverse faculty, and which is a challenge in the STEM fields. As Renetta Tull said earlier, we met at the Institute for Teaching and Learning, and it was great to be amongst so many talented doctoral students in STEM and in other fields. But if you want to bring those students into faculty positions, there are only so many students and a lot of institutions. And so it's very difficult to bring your faculty on par with your student population. And one of the things that we're trying to do is increase our pool of candidates. So that's one of the reasons we were at the Institute in Atlanta. Our provost joined us and really had a great time, enjoyed a lot of the sessions that he went to. He actually talked to folks at our table. So if you came to our table for the University of Buffalo on Friday, chances were you got to meet our provost, and we thought that was a pretty big deal. So one of the things that I'm really working on is trying to increase the pool of diverse candidates that we have for all of our faculty positions in the School of Engineering. And also, although I don't work in the College of Arts and Sciences, if someone, came to our table and was interested in biology or interested in math or interested in physics, I was able to talk a little bit about those programs because I work with students in those programs and direct them, to people whom they could help. We also work with student groups and student clubs. I am the advisor for the National Society of Black Engineers and for the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. So I try to lead those students through, a lot of professional development activities here on campus, and also community service activities within our Western New York and our university community. We're trying to do some executive board training with the students and really trying to show them how to be professional engineers and also how to give back to their communities. And one of the biggest things that I do, again, similar to what our colleague Renetta Tull talked about, was our Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation programs. So we have an undergraduate program of LSAMP, and we run a very robust summer program every year. It's 10 weeks. Our students get to work with well-known UB faculty. They get research, they get soft skills as well. That's another thing that Dean Folks has really been stressing is soft skills among our engineering students. She's gotten some feedback from companies and from executives from big companies here in the Western New York area and elsewhere that really our students and really students in general need to really work on their soft skills. So that's something that we do. I always tell our faculty, if you work on the science, I'll work on everything else. And so usually faculty will take me up on that. They do a wonderful job of mentoring the students through a scientific project that lasts for 10 weeks. The students do a poster and an oral presentation. And from there, they learn so many skills. Many of them have continued with the research this semester. And it really does give them a foothold into interests that they would have for graduate school or interests that they would have for a professional position. We are also, again, I'm working on search committee training. I have just submitted a grant for a Bridge to the Doctorate cohort. This will be our third. So I finally got some sleep and I have my fingers crossed, and I'm hopeful that grant proposal will be successful, because another thing that we're working on is increasing the number of underrepresented students in our graduate population. We have, UB has always been known as being a really great place for international students, and we've done a wonderful job of bringing international students in. They've been highly successful. They've done science, they've done management, they've done pharmacy, they, have done wonderful things academically and brought so much to Western New York and to our economy. But something that we're still concerned with is the number of underrepresented students, underrepresented US-born students who are in our STEM fields. And that's both on the undergraduate and graduate level. So we're hopeful that another cohort of Bridge to the Doctorate will add to that and make these students really be able to complete that pipeline. We start off with our younger students. I heard somebody talking about the MSP partnership grants. We have one of those in our Department of Chemistry with Dr. Joe Gardella. So he has been working tirelessly trying to improve STEM education on the middle and high school level. His grant is nearing the end of its cycle, but he has done some really good work, and we've all been partners in that grant. He has submitted for an NSF Includes grant to finish a lot of that work. So we, are working with Dr. Gardella in chemistry to do that. And this really all, again, oh, go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but a few questions were burning in my mind that I wanted to talk about. To get at some of the details, because there's so many amazing programs that you're leading and people at Buffalo are doing. And, a lot of the work that I do in working with underrepresented groups and women in IT, you touched on a little bit about soft skills, and some of the things that, I hear from women when, we talk about like, well, what type of training or professional development or what issues or challenges are you facing? A lot of the things I hear have to do with, which we hear a lot about in the news, like having your voice heard. How do I handle when I say something in a meeting and nobody responds and 10 minutes later a man says it? Or how do I help, amplify another woman's voice? And the other two are negotiation. We hear about a lot, like, how do I, because we hear women have much lower salaries, how do I negotiate a salary? And, the need for having, a mentor. And so I'm just wondering, in addition to soft skills, are there other kind of life skills that you also work with the students on?
Everything that you mentioned is something that we have talked about. I also run a group for women of color in STEM called STEMinism, and we meet every other Wednesday. And one of the things that we talk about is how to make your voice heard. And I've seen this happen. I took a bunch of students to the Buffalo Museum of Science and with my son's class. So this was the 5th grade. And, the students were working on a project. The girl says, I think we should do it this way. All 4 boys ignore her and they goof around a little bit more, and then they end up doing it her way. And so she just was sort of sitting there, shoulder slumped. And I told her, I said, keep using your voice. Keep speaking up. And I tell this to my undergraduates as well. Many of them are very frustrated by this, and they mention this all the time. The boys won't listen to me. The boys won't listen to me. And, I keep telling them to keep speaking up, keep using your voice. Try to get other allies on board with you. And we talk the same thing about mentors, is try to find an ally, someone who, and that's what a big part of our summer research program is helping students find mentors. We also do, I remember a few years back, we did a workshop called Facebook in the Flesh. One of the problems we have found is that our students are so tied in and so wired that they don't actually have conversations face to face. Everything is online. Everything is behind your avatar. Everything is 280 characters now or less. And so sometimes students don't really, I find they don't make correct eye contact. They don't take social cues as to when a conversation is over. So they just are sort of standing there waiting for some kind of cue when to leave, because they haven't had as many face-to-face conversations to sort of learn this. And so, we try to do some of that kind of training. We actually had an etiquette luncheon where we have an etiquette expert here in Buffalo. We had a full-blown etiquette luncheon with all the forks and all the plates and napkins and cups that you don't know what to do with. And we sort of led our students through an etiquette meal. It took us a couple of hours to eat. But, it was a way to let students know that there are protocols out there. There are ways of doing that you may not be familiar with, but could be of service to you if you were to go on an interview meal for graduate school, or for a position. So we talk to students about that. We talk to students about communication skills, especially how to communicate your science. It's very easy for students to talk about what they're doing and use very scientific language, use a lot of jargon. But what we try to explain to them is the people with the money are typically not scientists. They're typically lawyers or politicians. And those are the people that you need to convince to give you money to work on your wonderful project. So you really do need to break your science down to people who are not scientists. So communicating your science is another one of those kinds of soft skills that we talk about. And increasingly here at the university, people are talking about being entrepreneurial and really how to turn your ideas into, good things for the community and for the world. And so really teaching students about the business side of science and how to raise venture capital. I cannot tell you the number of pitch competitions that have sprung up in the past few years because many students really are looking at that sort of business side of science. So those are a few of the things that we've been doing.
Great. And I believe we have somebody who wants to come up on stage and ask you a question.
Oh, sure.
Oh, so we can't hear. No, I can't hear her either. Oh, okay, she typed in. I would like to share that the Career Center at UB offers a salary negotiation workshop for women using curriculum developed by AAUW. That's great. And and that was one of the things I was thinking about, Letitia, as you were talking about some of these different workshops and things. If some of the people in our audience are thinking like, this sounds really great, but how do I implement something like this on my campus? Can you talk a little bit about maybe how these things are funded and how somebody might, start small, maybe with a grassroots effort, or, what it takes to get going?
Absolutely. We're very lucky in that we do have funding from the National Science Foundation to do a lot of the things that we have piloted. Also, we have a budget from our School of Engineering that has, been very generous about this. And grant writing, we're always looking for grants and ways to collaborate with other programs. So Arlene, my good colleague Arlene, brings up a wonderful point that if you have a campus certainly our campus is very large. We have 30,000 students. So we have a lot of different offices that are doing a lot of these same kinds of things. So often we'll partner with another office, and I'm so glad Arlene mentioned that, because now I will advertise that and say, hey, there's, for all of my seniors, there's a salary negotiation workshop. Get over to Career Services and take advantage of that. So, Career Services is a partner. With my feminism group, I partner with counseling services. So they come in and talk to students about, how to sort of deal with the frustrations that you might feel in class when, the men don't listen to you, or maybe you have been passed over in class for an assignment, or you're working in a group and not everybody is carrying their weight. So we work with our counseling center. I talked about the pitch competitions. We have something called the Blackstone Launchpad, which is an expert in the entrepreneurial side of science and really all of the academic areas. Our graduate school has professional development. The School of Engineering has professional development. Our School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences has a whole program called Catalyst, where they teach graduate students how to transition into that first year. And so I rely on all of the offices on campus. So whether your campus is large or small, you can really rely on all of the offices throughout your campus, to present workshops and to really get students the information and the training that they need.
Okay. And I think we're going to bring up the other speakers now in case people in the audience have questions. And while they're coming up, Letitia, I wanted to ask you another question. I know Amy had talked a little bit about, trying to assess impact, and I'm just wondering if you've been able to do that all. Because I really love the vision statement of the School of Engineering and Applied Science, and I was just wondering if you could speak to that at all.
University office, and one of the things that they are launching is a university-wide climate study. And I know our dean wanted to have that done with the School of Engineering, and before we could sort of start thinking about that, the university announced that they were going to be doing a climate study. So we're hopeful that that we can adapt some of the questions specifically for a School of Engineering within this larger climate study that's going to be taking place within the next year and a half. And we think that is really going to yield a lot of data that we're going to be able to use about the things that we already have. They've done some small scale things, so we sort of know what we do well. And then we have another set of things that we're not doing so good at. And one of those, is diversity hiring among the faculty, especially among STEM faculty. So some of the things that we know we're not doing very well, we are endeavoring to do better and to, have new, launch new initiatives behind those things. But but as far as, hard and fast data, we're hoping that the climate study that the university is going to engage in will do a lot of that. We do a lot of small evaluations for our workshops. We do certainly an evaluation of our LSAM program every year. And should we get bridged to the doctorate, we have a full, I just saw the logic model, which was 4 pages. So we have a lot of evaluations that will go into those programs. So we do have data on that, but as far as university-wide, we're really looking at that climate study to kind of tell us where we should go next.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Anne Marie for coming up on the stage, and we look forward to hearing your questions.
There was a delay, so I feel like I'm breaking in when you were planning other things. I don't. Anyway, but my question is, you had said that there is professional development, and I'm just wondering, is there professional development for the non-underrepresented students? So in other words, how do we have to change our behavior, in terms of including people that have traditionally not been engineers or not been in, the sciences?
Well, at the University of Buffalo, again, a lot of our professional development happens on the school level. So we have something called SEAS 360. SEAS is School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. So those are workshops that everyone has access to. Our Career Services Office offers, that salary negotiation workshop that Arlene alluded to earlier. Those workshops are campus-wide. Our Student Affairs Office has a ton of workshops. So all of those workshops are offered, university-wide. The things that I'm doing for our LSAM students, are paid for by NSF. They're on a smaller scale, but they really mimic a lot of things that are going on university-wide. And so there are, on a large campus like ours, there's always tons of opportunities for professional development, for STEM, for non-STEM. So it's out there. The problem is getting students to find time for it and to know about it. Sending an email to a student is almost useless. They get so many emails that it's very difficult to get them to sort of tune in to your particular email. So that's, one thing that we're facing is how to communicate to our students all of the different events that could go on, on a day, on a random Wednesday like today. There are, hundreds of events that go on a campus like ours. So how do you get students to tune in to the one event that they really, really need and should have? I think that sort of is the bigger question and issue in my mind. But the professional development on a campus like ours anyway is definitely there.
Okay.
And as we bring up now the other speakers, Letitia, I think that's a great question, and I would love to hear from the audience if you have found successful ways to get in front of your students, and get these important messages in front of them.
Hi, I don't know if everybody can hear me. This is Renetta Toll, but I wanted to answer, I think it's Anne-Marie's question also, just based on something that we've seen happen at UMBC and some of the other universities in the University System of Maryland. We have used our grants to sort of set the foundation and to pilot a lot of the professional development programs that the university ended up taking up later. So it's almost like we used a small group that had not been served and then found that other students were not being served in those ways either. And so then there was a greater university partnership to provide it for the broader community. I'll give you two quick examples. So Amy talked about the pre-freshman program at Cornell. UMBC had the Meyerhoff Bridge, Summer Bridge, for students. And then the College of Natural Mathematical Sciences said, wow, what a great idea to have a pre-college or a bridging program for undergraduate students to really prepare them for their first year in a STEM program. And so now the College Division of Undergraduate Studies now has it available for all students who are coming into their first year. Similarly, with our new LSAMP grant that we received last year, the folks who are co-directing with me and others found that students had not been exposed to a wide variety of advising from the colleges when they were within their program starting in the first semester. So they received a lot of pre-things. But by the time September comes around and the end of September, the question was, okay, maybe they still didn't know some of the things they should be taking, or they weren't sure how they should access some of the resources. That was something else that came up on campus. Where were the tutoring centers, and knowing that it was okay to take advantage of that. And so while the LSAMP program sponsored, for example, at the end of September at UMBC, this program that had all of the STEM deans present to say, we're here, we are supporting you, and then having advisors available to answer questions and to talk about the university resources that are available to help the students. That was open to all of the STEM students on the campus, but the LSAMP program sponsored it and then made sure that the target audience knew that they were also strongly encouraged and invited to come to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent point. We have a AGAP grant, which is also sponsored by NSF. And AGAP is Alliances for Graduate Education and the Professoriate. And we are with a consortium of other schools that are looking at campus campus climate for graduate schools. One of the worries is that a lot of graduate students are not going into the professoriate, partly because their own graduate experience has been interesting, to say the least. So our AGAP grant really speaks to changing the climate and changing the way graduate education happens on campus. So we're looking at underrepresented students, but if in fact we change the climate for them, we change the climate for all students. So we are embarking on workshops. We had a wonderful workshop about a month ago by Ann Etkin, who is a professor emeritus from the Albert Einstein School of Medicine. She did a wonderful program talking to our faculty and our postdocs about diversity initiatives that were undertaken at Einstein, and some of the ways that you can really connect better with your students, especially underrepresented students. So again, when you do that, you make the graduate experience for all students better if you can, work with faculty to be, kinder, gentler, more understanding of their graduate students, and hopefully, part of the aim of the AGAP program is to get more students interested in faculty careers. And, so that is another example. Also, university-wide tutoring. We had university-wide tutoring for a number of programs that serve underrepresented students. And once the university sort of looked at that, they sort of started putting some resources toward university-wide tutoring for all students, because all students said, hey, we want tutoring as well. So Dr. Tull is absolutely correct that when you have these small-scale programs for underrepresented students, universities kind of catch on and say, hey, those are great programs that we should put more resources toward for all of our students.
The only thing I want to add to that is just the importance of talking with people across the campus, because many of our campuses are large and distributed, and you don't know what's necessarily going on in the individual pockets until you actually go out and talk with people. And then you can develop those synergies and figure out, how do we pool our resources to either make this broader or to bring it to a larger group of people or to tweak it in this particular way. And so this has been something that I think I have been doing quite a bit of, is just talking with people. What are you doing? How are you doing it? What can we do? And then we do also have a tutoring program through our Learning Strategy Center, which is also serving, again, a lot of our underserved students and students who are underserved in some way, but then they're also primarily focusing in on these gateway courses, these large intro courses, for really thinking about the success and promoting them through that.
So this is actually quite relevant to the work that we did with change and sustainability, because one of the things we talk about is the relationship between grassroots leadership and top-down leadership. And what Amy's describing and what everybody's been talking about is, if you have a good idea and it needs to be communicated broadly. So there's broad grassroots support for an idea or a concept or a proof of concept through as Letitia was describing, some of the grant outcomes. And then the administration can justify expanding those programs to reach more students, because in fact their accountability is student success. And what we're providing with these examples, these pilots, these grant-funded launches of new programs, is the proof of concept. And then between the communication, the faculty, grassroots leadership, and the administrative support, you get change on campus. And that's exactly how it happens.
Thank you. So one of the things I would love to hear more about, Nancy, you mentioned the need to try and shift the culture around teaching and learning and how difficult that can be. I'm wondering if you came across any examples where a university has been successful in beginning to do that, and if you could share that with us.
So, that is a very good question. And there's so many different domains of changing the teaching learning environment. So when we started with our MSP work, we really engaged professors, tenured professors and assistant professors, in working with K-12 teachers to as partners in professional development. And what our private theory of action was that when you bring the professors into contact with master teachers, they learn as much as the teachers learn about the content of the math, science, physics, chemistry, whatever. And so we were inviting these tenured faculty members to come into these experiences with the incentive that they needed. If they wanted majors to come out of the high schools, they needed to help the high school teachers gain more content knowledge, deeper content knowledge for their sciences. But in fact, the real aim was, the content knowledge coming in from the faculty and the pedagogy knowledge coming in. And that worked in a little bit and wasn't perfect. So that's sort of one example of how we tried to manage that process. But large-scale change in teaching, we did a major project at the University System of Maryland called a course redesign project. This was actually, interestingly enough, driven by the regents, who were, so this is very top-down, who were really interested in Carol Twig's model of course redesign. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Carol Twig. She has the National Center for Academic Transformation is the work that she did. She actually started, I think, at Cornell, but it might have been SUNY, SUNY. And what she sort of a real quickie description of her work. She said, it's the work of flipped classes. It's saying if students come better prepared to class, they will learn better. And how do you get them to be better prepared for class? Well, if initially she had them have to take a quiz on the class reading in psychology before they could come into the lecture. And sure enough, when that happened, they were better prepared for the lecture. That morphed into how can you use technology to help students get some content knowledge before they come to class so that they are better prepared to engage with the faculty member at a higher level, because it's not like they're seeing it all for the first time. So the Board of Regents was interested in this model of student learning, and they offered a set of grants to all the campuses, with support from Carol Twigg, actually, as a consultant, saying that every campus could apply to change one course, and the course they recommended changing was the course that had the highest dropout or failure rate. So on a campus, many of them were STEM courses, but on a campus, for example, developmental math or some of the entry-level math courses had very high failure rates. Or actually, at one of our campuses, the economics, the Intro to Economics course, which was a gatekeeper course for many of the business students and others, had a very high failure rate. And the question was, how could the faculty of that course come together collaboratively to change the structure of the course so the students did more online work or at-home work, and then change the nature of the instructional opportunity in the classroom. So that was a 3-year project that I led here at the system, and it had its ups and downs. As you can imagine, nobody wants to tell me, don't tell me that I need to use technology-assisted instruction to teach my very important course that has to meet 3 times a week with three 55-minute courses. Don't tell me that you're going to change. This is a speed up. You're telling me that I have to teach more, do more things. No, we're not interested. But in fact, as we developed, and this is, I think, one of the other keys to change, we developed communities of practice. So we identified the courses that were similar across multiple institutions. So if it was the introductory math course, for example, and we brought the faculty from many institutions together to talk about that math course. What are the learning outcomes? How do we want to make that a better course? And the faculty got very engaged in the transformation work of academic transformation. And I would say that all of the courses that we redesigned were, not 100% of them, but the majority of them were very successful. And then we had campus advocates who said, there's some there. So I would say that, there are different ways of approaching transforming the academic experience for students, but one of them is creating faculty learning communities.
Thank you. And this has been such a great conversation. I didn't even realize the time. And it's 1:30 now. But we do have a hashtag on Twitter that is STEM Students Thrive. So we'd love for you to continue the conversation there. And I know that some people have shared their contact information in the chat box, so you can go there as well. And we'd really like to thank everyone for attending today. And I just want to make sure I give the correct date for the next session. Our next session will be on Wednesday, January 10th. 2018, which I find that hard to say. The same time, 12 to 1:30 Eastern time. And for that session, we will be talking about learning spaces. We'll have Lisa Stevens from FlexSpace at University of Buffalo, along with Rebecca Rotundo, and Shin Lee from Cornell University, who will be talking about our new portal that's coming here to campus. And Jean Narum from the Learning Spaces Collaboratory. So please mark on your calendars the next date, January 10th. And thank you to all of our speakers and all the participants that joined us today. Until next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.